All right. Sharing this.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yes, I can see your screen.
You can see the presentation slide. As long as you guys can't see my notes, we're good.
No, we can't see your, I can't see your notes. Can anybody see her notes? Quien calla consciente. Perfecto. Okay.
Good. Okay, perfect. All right. So yes, here's the Slido number in case you didn't grab it in the chat. So Sarah, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm very pleased to be here and meeting all of you guys, at least virtually. So yeah, design operation inside a giant. So a little bit more about me. I recently relocated to Barcelona. My name has been pronounced in so many different ways because I'm originally from France. I moved to England where I started my career in program management, and I worked for a variety of companies, startups, agencies, where we met Sarah, the music industry, and the tech industry. I started working at Amazon in London about 7 years ago. And then I relocated to Seattle about 5 years ago before coming back to Europe about a couple of months ago. So as a program manager with a background in business, I'm not a designer. You will see that by looking at my next slides. Really, my specialty is around coordinating sort of the different cross-function that consist in the different type of industries that I've been working in. So yeah, specifically today, I want to talk about my experience at Amazon. So as mentioned, I started in London, then moved to Seattle in the HQ. And I started my career there in advertising. So working with creative designers, like graphic designers. And then I moved on to UX and I'm working on product design. So those are the kind of examples that I will be sharing with you guys. Sarah, as you mentioned, so, you know, you guys had a talk about design system, the last event. Today, I'm not going to be talking specifically about design system, but more about the operational strategy to support different types of teams and help them successfully deliver great products, great experiences, and work in as efficiently as possible. This at the Amazon scale, which I want to say there's no sort of magical solutions or you know, from my experience, every design operation practitioner is facing very similar problems. But what's very interesting about Amazon is the scale, just the size of the company. So the first example I want to share with you is about the operationalization of the creative delivery for Europe 5. So England, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. And for context, this use case happens in 2013 in advertising in Europe, and the business is growing double digit. The growth is huge. And to give you an idea, every Q4 is the peak season in advertising because of Christmas and then the holiday season. The Q1 of the following year is just as big as Q4. So every year is just getting bigger and bigger in terms of volume of work. I'm hired by the EU Creative Manager as a project manager or program manager rather to help the team surviving the volumes and create efficiencies in the work, but also improve the relationships with the rest of the stakeholders. So advertising at Amazon. So this is a screenshot of the B2B website, but essentially brands and announcers are buying media or campaigns on Amazon.com, .es, .co.uk, and so on, or on the Kindle Fire. And what happens is that the sales team is selling a campaign, the account manager and the technical account manager are working with the client, and I am sitting with the design team. That is a tiny team that works with all of those different stakeholders, and their job or our job is to take the client raw assets, so the product imagery, the lifestyle imagery, the copy, and so on, and then put it together so that the campaign can then be trafficked. this is an original slide from 2013 when basically we survived I survived my first Q4. So essentially the team that I was working with, that I started working with in London, was 12 designers, 4 different scrums happening at a different time using the webcam. Like it was pretty lo-fi, and the volumes were huge. We had 940 campaigns in Q4 across 3 months. That meant 3,300 pieces of work that I was coordinating with a team of 12 using Post-it notes. Amazon was using Post-it notes to scrum and stand up with the teams. This is the wall where I was putting all the Post-it notes up. And this Q4, we had a successful Q4 in terms of no live issues, meaning no campaigns live on the website didn't work, were buggy, and so on. Clients weren't happy, but it was a huge point of failure. Those paper notes were just flying off the wall. We didn't know how we were doing, and all of this data was disappearing as soon as we were throwing away the Post-it note. So the question I was asking was, okay, how can I make this easier for everybody and also for myself? Because my team was growing from one studio in London where I was sitting to another studio in Munich and another studio in Paris. So thankfully, the team was already using Jira. This is the old logo on purpose. The team was using it to capture all the campaign raw assets, but they didn't really utilize the full functionality of the tool. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with Jira, and I would not want to put some screenshots that I don't really have anymore, but essentially if you think about how Jira works, the whole point of operationalizing the delivery across multiple studios and that kind of volume, 3,000 plus campaigns, was to utilize the tool to start creating some specific phases. The first one was really to start reinforcing the intake process. When you think about hundreds of clients of campaigns that just send you hundreds times 3, 4, 5 assets like logo, imagery, copy, and so on. The client doesn't really know, the account manager doesn't really know, the technical account manager neither. That's not their job, and they just throw a bunch of JPEGs or whatever. And we were spending a lot of time back and forth thrashing around the quality of the assets. So utilizing Jira intake functionality allowed us to really create a very strict gate and providing them with context around what's acceptable and what also is starting the clock, basically saying, yes, your request is accepted and we are ready to get back to you within our SLA. The second functionality is a key Jira functionality. I think it's one of the most important of this tool, which is the workflow. And essentially, instead of having Post-it notes that you kind of move around, from to do, doing, done, we use the workflow to be able to go even deeper into explaining the actual status of the project. So the campaign is accepted.
Reinicia también el ordenador.
No, pero yo que ya va a haber pasado, lo veo ya.
Ah, ¿por qué?
Sorry, guys,
Ah,
I'm
pues
gonna
sí.
Porque me estoy perdiendo bastante.
because somebody put their mic.
And
Mira,
yes, Sarah, thanks you.
Después, ahí estaban. Aquí, véalo aquí.
Sorry, Myron, please carry on. Guys, please pay attention to your mics. I'm going to mute everyone except you, Myron.
So that we could start stating exactly where we at with this campaign. So you imagine those assets coming in, the client is waiting for their campaign to get traffic, and we have a deadline, we have a start date for the campaign. So using the workflow really allowed us to really understand and codify where we at in review, in progress, and what's going on with those digital assets. If they are in review, it means that they can be picked up from design and then showed to the client for their feedback. The second thing was to bring the team on Kanban. So assuming you guys are familiar with the methodology of Kanban, which is a functionality on Jira where you can use all of that data into your intake and your workflow and start putting it into those different phases. So, accepted, in progress, in review, done. And the final big pillar was to use the capability of Jira to start measuring, tracking, and forecasting. But what I meant for the team is that we had this gatekeeping at the beginning of the workflow that really allowed us to being able to push back on any brief that was incomplete or not good enough, and being able to set those boundaries with the team, but also allowed us to educate the teams that we're working with that were earlier in the workflow, those technical account managers and account managers that were educating clients about what was a good asset and what wasn't. The workflow allowed us to create visibility in a sense that using a status that say it's in progress or it's done, allow us to create a self-served status update where all of our partners, so again, technical account managers who have clients asking them what's going on, where are we at, and so on, instead of coming over to our desk and say, okay, what's going on with this thing? Can you, with my campaign, when are you working on this, and so on? They could self-serve that information, which freed up a ton of time from my team. And then Kanban created accountability from my team, from the design team, to self-report on their work. And just them being able to be autonomous and have ownership on just saying, this is where I'm at with this ticket, and using the self-service status, they were completely autonomous in reporting that work, but also accountable for the accuracy of the status. And finally, being able to forecast. I mentioned this really helped creating some data-driven analysis and identify some patterns, and I'll give you an example later. So this is obviously, a lot of the content from Amazon, I can't really pull it and show it to you guys, but this is just an example of a cheat sheet with quality checks. And what's important about this is that by bringing the entire workflow from, our own sort of like big wall and our post-it notes to an end-to-end workflow that was brought in and shared with the rest of our stakeholders and the entire ad services team, we were able to work together in improving the workflow and look for ways of creating efficiencies and really solidifying essentially roles and responsibility. Before, design was just, and behind this black box and just told, okay, design is late, or we don't really know what's going on, and so on. After, with this process in place, all the teams were able to work together and really understand what is our ultimate goal and how can we get there, if not faster, better. Having this workflow also allowed us to use methodologies like Lean and Six Sigma to create more improvements. What that meant for me is that I was able to, I had a team of 2 actually, but this is my first badge at Amazon. So I was able to work across EU5, which was really big because having, 2 time zones and 3 different studios and 5 different sets of stakeholders, having a digitalized operational strategy really helped me working across everybody and scale myself to the point that I was able to, me and my team, our baseline was double the baseline in the US. And in fact, this is how I started working with my baseline was twice as fast as the US, and then our designers were spending 1/3 of the time in terms of overheads. So the time that we were spending in kind of getting everyone ready was 1/3 of what it was before, which created a lot of efficiency if you think about how much that accumulates to on a daily basis. And this process was then adopted in the US. In fact, this is kind of how and why I moved to Seattle. And then also helped us opening a production studio in Bangalore, which is 12.5 hours difference with Seattle. So obviously we had to have sort of that kind of process and methodology to work seamlessly. So really what's important about this this use case is that, 7 years ago when design operation wasn't really a thing, we're trying to kind of figure out how do we create efficiencies. Those 4 pillars became sort of essential to any strategies that I deployed in the rest of my career at Amazon. Having in-tech workflow, the Kanban, or any type of methodology that creates accountability and ownership from the team because quite often you are one design operation person for a team that can get bigger and bigger and bigger. So thinking about ways of creating ownership from your team is how you scale, basically. Instead of me doing it for everybody, everyone's going to be chipping in. In this case that I just showed you, it's about everyone on the team is going to be reporting on their status. And then the fourth pillar, which is, you know, essential, is being able to have data to be able to make decisions, improvement, and so on. So around that time, interestingly, the largest pan-European campaign hits the decks. And what happened is that, I was in Munich at that time, and one of our account executives came up to me and the EU creative manager and say, super excited, I signed this amazing campaign. You know, it's a great budget and so on. But my manager, creative manager, and I would just look at each other, and I start punching in the numbers, or rather creating a nifty Excel spreadsheet and looking at the complexity of the campaign. Basically, you guys are familiar with Lego. There are two different type of products, Lego Junior and Lego Duplo. Junior has girls and boys, and altogether, we've got 14 different types of products, and each of those products, they were sold for every type of products available per locales, but the products differ depending on UK, Germany, Italy, France, and Spain. Anyway, it was super complex, and also it was adding up to a ton of work, 848 like pieces of creatives, 356 design hours estimated, because we've never seen that kind of campaign before. We have very little time, but also we didn't have any design bandwidth available for this because the rest of the team was just on the current, you know, pipeline of work. So it was a little bit scary, but we worked on an approach that was based on two things. One was to create a batching strategy to allow us to deliver campaigns, not only design delivering the creatives, but also the technical team to traffic those ads and put them live on the website. So we wanted to be able to batch this, learn about our velocity, but also make sure that we would not impact the rest of the pipeline of work. And then the second part of the approach was to create a design approach that would be hyper templatized and allow us to go fast. So I don't have all of the creatives, but I can show you one quickly. So this is a Kindle Fire, and so you see Lego Junior boy. So the template was about, the brief from the client was super complicated, and we simplify it so that we could simply swap the key assets between the lifestyle imagery, the product, and the copy. So you see this is the German version, UK version. And what was important about that is that we worked very hard with the account management team to get the agreement from the client that they would sign off the sort of template and then just let us run with every single creatives that we had to do, which was great and helpful. And internally, we removed some of our internal review process because the template was so straightforward that there were no room for error, basically. So I was able to have one senior designer being the kind of, you know, overseeing and the owner of the templates, and 3 production designers just powering through everything with a Photoshop file and layers. So in terms of approach, essentially what happened is that we looked at the prioritization of the product so that we could satisfy the client and make sure that the key products would go out as early as possible. We agreed to remove the sign-off, and essentially what this allowed us to do was to change our SLAs, service level agreement, which is essentially the timeline that we sign on with the client to say, okay, you know, like one simple static ad will take 5 days. Usually an SLA is, you know, 5 to 10 units is 5 days, but we went from 5 units to 80 units in 5 days. So we're able to deliver really fast. So, you know, at the end, even if I was able to share the results, we didn't have results because that was the first one ever. I almost want to say unprecedented, but we can't say this word anymore. So there's no baseline for this campaign to truly understand what was going on, or rather how well did we do. But the feedback was really positive. And I think from my perspective, we were able to deliver with a small team on time, and we're able to, you know, keep the client happy, keep the team, you know, happy and not overwhelmed. But also, this really allowed us to make the business start thinking about, one, efficiencies. And meaning, because I had this system on Jira, we were able to see sort of pan-EU patterns. You know, some products are sold all across Europe, or some products are sold first in the US and then in Europe. So why don't we reuse those assets and localize them, rather than, you know, not, you know, work separately and redo their work several times. And secondly, this use case, this campaign, increased business opportunity by, you know, the business started selling pan-European campaigns because we were able to actually handle those. Okay, so second example that I want to share with you guys, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I took you through the, you know, advertising and graphic design, and now I'm moving on to product design. And this is my last team when I was working at Search, and the team was about 30 people, and we're interacting with the whole of Amazon on a weekly basis. And the sort of subtitles, or the thought around this, is sort of the question around what's best between a decentralized team or a centralized team. So just to put everyone on the same page, a decentralized or distributed team is when product designers report into a product manager or an engineer in lots of different teams. And a centralized team is when you have, for example, a VP of design and all of the design practitioner reporting into this VP of design, whose peers are VP of engineering and VP of product, for example. They both have pros and cons, you know, in terms of, you know, business efficiencies and delivering results, and talent retention. The example that I'm going to be walking through is kind of showing you how this thing happened, like both situations kind of happen at Amazon all the time. And specifically, that was the case for my team. So context, I took my team on a painting trip. The octopus was our mascot. So at Amazon, you have search. So if you go on the website, you've got the search bar. So you've got search, which is a central team. And then you have all of the different departments. And you have variation per country and special projects like Prime or, you know, Amazon Video. And you have difference per locales. For example, Amazon Fashion is in Seattle, but also in Madrid. So what does that mean? That means that, you know, we've got central teams like search, my old team. You've got detail page team as well. You've got cart checkout, homepage, and navigation. So search is about 500 people. So you can consider that each of those key central teams are about 500 people a team, so 2,500. And then you can add each of those departments. They will have about, you know, few hundreds of people in their team, and that counts design, product, and engineering. And then you have Prime, that is another team that is thousands of people, Amazon Video, Amazon Music, and then you have all of the different countries. So Amazon is like, well, altogether it's 800,000 people, but that includes fulfillment centers as well. I believe Seattle HQ is 80,000 people. So I think HQ is about 100,000 people, roughly. So that gives you an idea of the size of the teams and the different sort of parts of the business, organizations, and so on, that all work together one way or another. And quite often they all want a piece of real estate on the search page. So for example, if you search for a banana, then you get your results, but all of those different teams, you know, like the ad team, the pantry, Prime Video, everyone wants to, you know, get their products on the search page, which is why my team in search, we're in a position where not only we had our own projects and our own goals, which is how can we improve the shopping experience for the Amazon customer, any Amazon customer, for any shopping mission, for any product available at Amazon. But we also were working with all of those different 300 teams outside Amazon that wanted to work with us because they wanted to deploy their codes and their design onto the search experience. So what did we do? Of course, we did a design system. My team built a design system that was launched about 2-3 years ago. I can't show you the actual design system. Fortunately, it's completely confidential. I don't have access to it anymore, but the design system worked in parallel with the technology. So the engineering sandbox and my team, the design team, built a design system that would help any partner design and build on the search experience. So my team owned this and built this, but what happened is that when you have the design system allowed us to help, or rather to coordinate all those 300 plus teams to build on the search experience. But the problem is, and it's actually a Jeff Bezos quote, good intentions are not enough. Meaning you can't really trust 300 teams to do the right thing. If you create a design system that says, okay, those are the rules, those are the guidelines, those are the patterns, and so on, it might be beautiful, it's not gonna work. So unless you have guardrails, codified guardrails, you can't throw in 300 people and hope that they're gonna keep the site consistent. They're gonna think about all the different use cases and not think just about their part of the business. And as you know, in design, there's no black and white answer, meaning, you know, any small kind of, you know, element on the website just could, or rather any tiny decentralized team are working on their own project and they want to work with us, with our centralized team, and those conversations can take hours or weeks and so on. But we ended up having a tiny centralized team just handling hundreds of distributed teams. And what happened is that it became a massive bottleneck. Oh, my slide's a little bit funny. It became a massive bottleneck, and this is my little octopus kind of droning into all the products. Because, you know, partners are not really happy because we're just taking time. It just takes time to get back to them and give them the approval and so on. And there are so many of them, 900 requests a year. Plus, what happens is that my team of 30 is also set to deliver design goals for search, and that those goals require designer bandwidth. So we got into this massive bottleneck situation where our design system was ready, but didn't have those guardrails to really allow us to just walk away from it. All the teams were flooding it, didn't really always make the best decisions. My designer team, I'm sure designers on the call can relate. If your job becomes answering requests after request after request, reviewing someone's work again and again, and that someone just wants to disagree with you, because that's what Amazonians do, they just disagree. It just becomes really tiring. So there were also kind of attrition problem where the team was just not happy. So this is a quote from Jeff Wilke, who was, you know, one of the original leadership team at Amazon, that are really resonated with me, and I think is critical when you think about design operations. Design operations, quite often, our job is about creating those bottlenecks. But if you want to have a strategy with your design operation, you have to control where the bottlenecks are. Meaning you can't just do all the things. You have to control when, you know, you have to say no or you have to make trade-offs and so on. So managing the bottlenecks rather than having them managing you. And that was the whole point. It was about shifting sort of the situation so that we would manage that bottleneck instead of just being overwhelmed and flooded. So the approach that I took was very similar to what I was doing in advertising, because, you know, again, those are different types of design, but from a design operations standpoint, it's the same sort of approach where you want to utilize sort of those 4 pillars, and I'm adding a 5th one. So intake, workflow, prioritization, Kanban or sprints, you know, as mentioning earlier, the accountability and the ownership can happen with different sort of techniques and forecasting. Just for sort of the specifics, for that team, I used SIM, which is the Amazon equivalent of Jira, and then Asana as well, which is another tool that's it's very helpful for managing design workflows. But essentially, what was important is that we use the intake and the Kanban and the forecasting aspect of the design strategy to being able to put some numbers, create some visibility around the work. If you get completely, you know, flooded by the amount of work and requests and by really high volumes, you have to be able to put a number, whether it's, you know, a number of requests, an estimated number of hours, and you have to be able to report on that capacity and that status to be able to have meaningful conversations and being able to understand where your bottleneck is. Especially, remember, design system is the design system, and design is not always well understood by engineering or by product, you know, in a company, in a tech company like Amazon. Sometimes, you know, when your leadership is quite often technical leadership, they don't necessarily understand why does it take so much time to answer this design problem. So being able to put a number and create visibility became really important in being able to say, okay, look, this is the amount of work that this whole endeavor represents. And then you can start comparing with your headcount, with the number of people that you have on your team and so on. And then the other important thing or part of the strategy was to add the prioritization. So search is about 500 people. And at that point, I was in a situation where my team of 30 designers who were accountable for goals for an organization of 500 people, so that includes engineering, data scientists, product, and so on. I had to be able to bring everyone on board when we're having those conversations around prioritization. So again, it's about the bottlenecks, it's about being able to say, we have to make trade-off in the work that we are doing. If partners want to be doing this, but we want to be doing that, here's the numbers, and let's start stack ranking. From a tactical perspective, what that meant is that I was meeting weekly with the team to be able to review all of the partner requests on a weekly basis. At some point, we were thinking about meeting twice. And then I was meeting twice monthly and monthly with our leadership across the team, across search, to be able to look at that stack ranking. And again, you know, I was saying there's no magical sort of tools or solution, but we're literally looking at projects and prioritizing numbers and then discuss this for hours and being able to understand, okay, what is most important, you know, especially when you have a partner like, you know, Amazon Prime or really big partner, really important program for the business all up, that is creating an escalation. You know, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but Jeff Bezos sometimes sends a question mark email to his leadership team when there's something that he's not happy with. And then that question mark email kind of goes down the chain, and then people have to fix that problem. I never had a question mark email, but escalation can go really fast and just involve a lot of very senior people. So what's the end of the story? Well, you know, I left this team in December last year, and I don't have the latest story, but really the situation is that this took a lot of people, a lot of design operation people and operation people. We were 3 UX program managers working on that triaging and that program management of all those requests and looking for efficiencies and so on. And we also had 3 technical program managers from engineering helping us out. So it takes a lot of people, and you can't really expect those efficiency to work without a design operation and operation team. The future definitely lies in automation and codified guardrails, but it takes time to get there. When you build a beautiful design system, it just takes time to be able to get it to the next level where it's fully, you know, self-serve and doesn't need people to just check the work. All right. Next example, so delivering the largest design sprint at Amazon. So I wanted to share a third and last example that shows that working across lots of different teams can also be a lot of fun. It doesn't have to be that nightmare that I just explained to you before. To give you some context, I was also working at Search, and my head of design asked me, well, they posed this riddle asking, how can we better collaborate in the company of 800,000 employees and just improve the customer experience for all of our customers around the world? So a big problem. In a design world, when this kind of problem happens, the answer is, let's do a design sprint. So design sprint, I'm sure you guys are familiar. It's the Google venture approach of putting everyone in the room, and by everyone, it's about 7 people, designers, product managers, engineering, stakeholders. Put them in the room, and then you've got a sequence of days with a specific agenda. And the idea is to rapidly innovate, or rather ideate the diverge phase and create a lot of ideas and so on, and converge, voting, narrowing down the ideas, prototyping them, doing some quick testing, and then at the end of the week you have a new product. So that's kind of the idea. And we wanted to do this across Amazon. So we netted out around 15 different teams, organizations. So you remember when I was showing you all of the different organizations at Amazon, we picked 15, which equated to 48 participants. So obviously you can't put 48 people in a room, or maybe you can. Well, we ended up doing, or I ended up producing 6 design sprints at the same time. And funny enough, this year I also got engaged. So this is what that felt like for a hot second. But it was not like that, but it did feel like that. So practically what I did is that, or rather we were 2 people working on this project, me and a principal UX designer. And what we did is splitting the 48 people into 6 teams. And then I booked 6 rooms into one of the towers in downtown Seattle, one of the new US HQ buildings. Those are the big steers, by the way. Those are massive, you know, inside it's like the ecosystem. There's like tropical trees and it's insane. But I booked 6 rooms, which is not that easy, and spent an entire week going up and down. So very lo-fi, but we had six different teams, 48 people working together at the same time. And so we used the Google framework, and this is kind of from the Google framework book or website. And that's what I was explaining earlier, but the modification that we made, because we had 48 people in 6 different rooms that didn't talk to one another or would not talk to one another, the first day we did a show and tell, and we got everyone in the room for like a learning day. And what we did is that we advertised our design system, obviously, because we had those 15 teams out there, and we said, hey, here's our design system, use this in your ideation. And then on the last day, we did a presentation, again, everyone together in the same room so that people could see what other, you know, the other 5 sprints did during the week. So a couple of pictures. I'm not gonna bore you to death with like pictures of people that you guys don't know. It all went very well, but here's the sort of key learnings when you think about organizing a really large event like this, like, you know, over like more than one design sprint at the same time, basically. This event, to be successful, required a very high level of communication. We spent 2 months plus talking to those 15 organization leaders, like director, VP level. We talked to them, we got their buy-in, we just told them why this was important, and constant communication really helped us making sure that we had 48 people that were invested, because you can't really have an event and have people just leaving in the middle of the sprint. So then your team goes from 7 people to like 3, and then it just doesn't work. So making sure that we got the team really, you know, invested in this. We collected a ton of data in advance. We used, Amazon is using Quip, so it's like Google Doc. And we used, or rather, yes, we used a sort of form. So remember the intake process. We used a form to be able to collect the data around customer problems, any research or any data that they were able to share, each of the organization were able to share with us. We planned the team carefully and in biased way, meaning we just looked at the level of seniority, obviously the type of roles, but also thinking about, you know, when you build an event with lots of different teams like that, what are the kind of key stakeholders or programs that need to cut across each of those different teams? So for example, advertising happens, you know, everywhere. Everywhere, advertising is everywhere. So we had to make sure that we had a representative of advertising in each of the 6 groups. Obviously, just keep everyone happy and fed and just bring booze at the end, have a celebration. That's really important for morale. But after the event, something that is really important for the success of an event like this, but also a future event, is to make sure that you've lined up resources and you've got a plan for after the ideation, so that when you have 48 people that invested a week, if you think about it, that's a ton of money for the business. So making sure that you have a plan for implementing, you know, the best ideas, or the, you know, an after event plan to make sure that then you can say, okay, this is why we did this. And finally, never underestimate the powerful act of design collaboration. So what was beautiful about this, you know, this crazy event is that those 6 different teams, they actually came up with ideas that were super similar. And even if they come from lots of different organizations, and in the previous example, I was showing you how everyone kind of bickers and, you know, they all distributed teams and decentralized team, and it takes forever to get an agreement. When you put everyone in a room, and that makes me feel funny to say this in 2020, because, you know, today we kind of reinventing ourselves in the remote world. But putting everyone in a room and people that were collaborating together was super powerful. You could see how themes emerge across different teams. And, you know, when you start connecting, you know, departments that are completely different. I don't know, I'm going to make an example. It's not a real example, but like, you know, you combine shoes and video, and you're like, oh my God, we have the same kind of problems, and let's just solve it, you know, in similar ways. That becomes super powerful and super interesting. And the teams love this. They really felt like this was a really, you know, a great use of their time. Okay, so what's next? Well, you know, my goal with this presentation was really to show you the evolution of design operations. I mean, in the 45 minutes was an accelerated evolution of the 6.5 years that I spent at Amazon. But it's been interesting for me to, you know, look at the first strategies, being the first design operations manager in teams that were just trying to figure out design 7 years ago. We know that Amazon, you know, still, like a lot of companies, have a lot to figure out in design. We still have, you know, space for improvement, but it's been really interesting to see the rise of design operation, to see how, you know, organizations started understanding, believing, and investing in design operation. And I think it's been an incredible experience to really develop this, you know, fungible skill set and thinking about how to design operation, you know, just applying the design, customer centric and a design thinking to processes, mechanisms, and program management has been, you know, very, very interesting and very fulfilling. And if you guys are thinking, should I, you know, invest in UX program manager or the design manager, go for it. You will see a lot of improvement, efficiency, improvement on team retention and team happiness and so on. So yeah, that's my recommendation anyway. Thank you guys.
Absolutely brilliant, Marion. Oh my God, I had no idea. You disappeared for 8-10 years and you come back with all of this. Thank you so much. Guys, show your appreciation with the applause. That's awesome. I will still, please don't unmute yourselves. For the questions, we have Slido. I will repost this. I have reposted this on the chat, slido.com. You can come in with the code 39617. Super easy to use. And then you're gonna, if you are in there already, you can see the questions are coming up, have been coming up. If you're not there yet, you can come in, have a read of the questions, and you can vote. You don't need to post the same question twice. If you want that question to be asked, you can just say, I would like this to be voted, just by giving it a thumbs up. So Marion, I already have a few questions for you, and we still have half an hour of your time. Would you care for answering some of those?
Yeah, of course.
Great. So I think that the first question we have here is, I always hear design ops is not using management tools. How important tools can be in the real implementation of operations inside large corporations?
Yeah, so tools are, am I still sharing my screen? What am I doing?
Yeah, that's
perfect. So wanted to see if I want to bring this up. So yeah, tools are important, but I think it's a great question because my perspective is that design operations should be agnostic of the tools. Why? Because there is no tool that will just fix all of your problems, all of my problems for that matter. Like, there's no perfect tool, but also there's always a new tool coming out. So if you build a strategy that is based on the tool, then you're missing on opportunities for improvement, for future improvement, and for adapting to new technology and so on. So there are variations depending on tools. You know, some you might have to make trade-offs depending on, you know, the capabilities of your tool, and that's when you want to you do a tool analysis, basically a functionality analysis to understand, okay, well, this tool doesn't have all the bells and whistles, or this tool has this one thing that is critical. For example, you know, Jira workflow is really powerful, but it's not doing that thing. What is the most important thing now, functionality or throughput, that I need to be able to achieve my #1 goal?
Interesting, and I agree completely.
Excellent.
Next question. What was the key to get designers to internalize the use of a tool like Jira? It can be quite daunting.
Yeah, 100%. And you know, that's why, so Jira was quite daunting. Sim, which is the Amazon own tool, looking like Jira, no, with the same functionality as Jira, but so much worse from a look and feel perspective. And then I moved my team to Asana because nobody could hack Sim, basically. So yes, again, you know, that kind of decision that you have to make around trade-offs on functionality. What is your goal? If your goal is you know, avoiding this design attrition or ensuring your team well-being, then you might want to trade a very, you know, helpful functionality like querying data for a beautiful tool like Asana, where you can't really query projects and tickets, like the tools, you can't query them, which is a pain in the butt for any design operations manager or manager for that matter. But the tool looks much better, so it's much easier to get your design team on board. What is your ultimate goal? And you know, that's why when you think about a tool, It's the same as when you're designing for a product or a service. You're not gonna just do it because you can. You're gonna do it because that's solving for a specific customer problem. Oh, I think you muted, Sarah.
I was. I don't want the noise of the 3-year-old screaming in the background to bother anyone. There's a question here about regarding the Jira usage in the ad team. Were you considering at any point to customize the states, that is to go beyond the standard ticket Jira states?
Absolutely, yes. So I didn't go in detail in the status because I didn't want to just teach you everything about this job. But the deeper you go, the better data you can get. So we would get, so for example, before, I think the first iteration of the workflow was, you know, not ready, ready. And then we moved to not ready to assets available, which means that someone in my team could actually look at the assets and just double check the PSDs are layered, for example, to assets rejected or assets approved. And then we would add campaign in progress. And that level of granularity, instead of having one status, we had 4. That level of granularity, 1, allowed us to provide more information in a self-service way, but 2, provide us to get data. So if you're teaching the team of the status prior to you to do the right thing, and you give them all the tools like Photoshop, here's what we mean about this, and then their rejection rate is still very high, then you can ask yourself, okay, there's a problem here. Do we need to do more training? Do we need to change our roles and responsibility? But how can we act on this information to make it better or faster based on our goal, which is delivering on time and so on?
I'm going to do a follow-up question on that is not on Slido, taking my host privileges. So did you have any help when you say we, obviously you were managing the team, but did you have any help in making sense of the data that you were getting from Jira to make sure that you were doing the right fixes in the right places?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, I keep bouncing on we and I, because there was a team effort in the sense that, you know, towards the end of my tenure there, I was, you know, I had 2 reports, but also because there is a sense of buy-in with the entire team. You know, all the different stakeholders have to agree to this working model, which I think is critical for this process to work. But back to your question, was it by myself to analyze the data? Hell yeah. And I spent a lot of time querying all that data from Jira and pulling massive Excel spreadsheets and so on. And eventually, when I moved to the US, we had a business analyst that started helping us. And because we were, essentially the way Amazon works, it's a big startup. You have to do everything yourself. And once you prove the case, say, hey, I've done this myself on top of my job, and here's why this is important for the business, for the customer, then that's when you can start having conversations around hiring someone with the right skill set to do it. So I did it all myself, and then we started having some business analysts on the team.
Fantastic. So I'm not alone. Brilliant. So there's another question here about the specific the team capacity. So it says, could you give a specific example of capacity estimation for the design team? And I understand that I imagine that would be about the team of 30.
Yeah, so capacity estimation, that's a sacred grail. I always told my team, you know, we want to be able to know exactly, you know, at the beginning of the year, we have, you know, 5 VP goals that we can break down into 10 team goals, and then that equates X amount of design hours. But this is super hard. Like, I've not been able to crack it. You know, when you and I were working in agency, obviously you make an estimation, you've got a statement of work and so on. But in-house, you know, it's going to take as long as it's going to take. Things going to happen. We're going to get delayed. And at Amazon specifically, you know, it's all about the right customer experience. So there's no minimal viable product. So it's all about the best customer experience. So back to the question around, was I able to create capacity models? I've started building a repository of use cases, so that instead of speaking in hours of design time, or, you know, researcher, design technologies, and so on for that matter, I would speak in terms of past projects, so that I would be able to say and give it a sense to my stakeholders, you know, when, you know, director of engineering say, but we want this person and we want them to work on this and work on that. So, well, here's what we're working on. Remember, I had this stack rank prioritization that we all agreed on. This is what we worked on. This project, based on what we know so far, we think that it's going to be as big as project that we did last year. And that's kind of started, you know, helping our partners understanding the sizing of the projects and the complexity.
Oh, that's super interesting. A repository of projects. That's
yeah, and I had this goal to start going a layer deeper, which was using sort of like a design system, like patterns of activities. So just same as when you're building a client, when you say, okay, we're going to be doing this, starting thinking about what are the different activities that we want to be doing. But when you're in-house, it's really hard because, you know, things have to happen basically, and you just get delayed and everything got pushed to the next sprint and so on. So we didn't really get, or I didn't really get to that point where I had that level of granularity. But having projects or programs to think about started helping with making those big decisions.
my space bar is not working. Thank you. There's a sort of related question, which is, did you ever have to justify design team velocity to other teams that maybe are used to different degrees of velocity, like dev?
Yeah, 100%, all the time. And dev teams can estimate their work. They do a lot of padding. They have more resources. It's easier for them to estimate the work. So yes, there's always some tension between sort of understanding the velocity of design versus engineering. And the way I've tackled this, or the angle for the conversations, more than the conversation, in fact, the way I evangelize design was by removing the black box around design. So the more transparency you create, the more understanding you get. If you start bringing your engineering team, just bring them, you know, do a brown bag, you know, presentation, show them, take them to research, like to an, you know, in the field research study, have them come with you to a shop along, or have them come to a design sprint, or have them come to, you know, design review, so that they understand and they see what's happening. First up, they're going to be super excited. It's going to take them away from their coding, and then they're going to start really get it. So everything I did was to bring product and engineering into the conversation. I invited them to my weekly stand-ups. They didn't always show up, but they, you know, creating that visibility, creating more understanding, so that it's not just a simple design thing that should be taking an hour. They just start kind of getting it.
A woman after my own heart. When this is over. I think that you mentioned research, you know, like bring people into design. Design is a big complex process. So there's a question here about, would you merge design and research ops?
Yeah, that's a great question. So research ops, I never had a dedicated research ops program manager in my team. That was one of my goals in my last team when I was at Search. I was talking to our head of research and then sort of shaping the role. I've seen different teams having a research ops person, dedicated person. I wore that hat a few times. I think that the role, the UX program manager or the design ops person, is a very fungible role. I do think as well that it depends on the type of talent, meaning I personally worked in research, or rather with usability research, with market research. I'm familiar with the profession and the sort of challenges. people on my team or program managers on my team were more on the tech side, more on the design side. So I wore the research ops hat because I knew what was important and what kind of was, okay, I don't need to be, you know, into the weeds on that, but this is where they might need my help. So back to the question, is it good to merge? I think the role is fungible. If your team becomes big enough, then yeah, you know, it's worth having a dedicated person. Otherwise you can have, you know, a part-time, third-time kind of design ops person working with the research team.
And not to put you in a hard spot here, but what is that size? How big is big?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my team of 30 design practitioners, that included researchers, design technologists, and designers, design managers, and so on. We were 3 design ops. So 1 to 10 is a really good ratio. In advertising, so creative design, rather graphic design. So the sort of numbers that we were using was that 1 producers, we call ourselves producers, 1 producers equals or creates 1 button seat every 3-4 designers. So if you got 4 designers, you add a producer, then it's like if you had 5 designers because of the efficiencies that producers are creating.
Did you ever get pulled into executing work?
So not design work. I never, you know, no, I never did anything like that. Trying to think really hard. There might have been some really tough time, but no, I never did anything like that. But did I run around and fix some, you know, last minute issues, or run to get some printouts, or try and make sure that everyone was okay? Like the event planning, you know, I was giving you an example, but like a lot of that, a lot of, you know, being a runner, I quite often compare design management, or design operation rather, with being the tour manager of a band. The band is playing on stage and I'm not going to pick up the guitar, but I'm going to make sure they're okay, they have everything that they need, and I might become an electrician or, you know, a sound engineer for a hot second. So yeah,
that's cool.
My experience.
Question for you that is actually one on Slido was, how would you define design ops? And you just defined it, you're the band manager.
The tour manager, yeah. And it's, you know, for anyone who's looking into a career in design operations, to be transparent and, you know, show you also the pitfalls. This is a job that appeals to people who like to be the tour manager, being backstage, not being on stage, and not being at the forefront, and not being in the limelight. And so there's a bit of that. And that's an easy place to be. And if you want to progress in your career, that's not what you should do. You should be out there and say, this is what I'm doing. This is why this is important. These are all my achievements, and so on. And especially when, you know, design is not always understood. Design operation, you know, it's like a Russian doll. You got design and you got design operation, which is like the smallest doll within design. So you have to be very vocal, and to, you know, being that person who evangelize not only the team design, but also your role and your achievements, so that people understand what is it that you do.
Amazing, amazing. I think that there's another couple of questions that we still have time for. One of them is, were there any ops techniques that seemed promising but failed?
Yes. So at Amazon, Amazon has leadership principles. I'm just going to make a parenthesis about Amazon. So if you Google Amazon leadership principles, you will find there's 13 of them, and those are important pillars for the company that everyone follows and align to. They will like value company culture. One of them is called disagree and commit, which is, you know, I told you that Amazonians just disagree and want to argue, but also because we want to argue and just, you know, push for the best solution possible, sometimes we have to just disagree and commit and do the thing even though we disagree with it. I had this very moment with, you know, design operations, where my teams, or rather my leadership team, design managers, my head of design said, okay, let's just move the team into a 2-week sprint planning. because that's what engineering are doing. And that is, you know, that they're going to understand us better because we are working on a 2-week sprint planning. And I said to them, 2 weeks is way too fast at the pace. And we're going to spend our time, we didn't do all the Scrum ceremonies, but we're going to spend our time, you know, in stand-up, prioritization, updating tickets, and making sure that, you know, all of our data is up to date. And what's going to happen is that those, you know, tickets or those, you know, sprint activity is going to last for many, many sprints, like 2, 4, and so on, because a monthly cadence is much more timely for the work that we are doing. And just for, you know, one of the questions was around how did you get designers on Jira? You have to keep it very simple. You can't just, designers honestly want to just tick the boxes, you know, and just like done, done, done. It's just that doesn't work. So bad decision was to bring the team on a 2-week sprint planning. It didn't work because of not the right time frame, not the right pace for the design work. What works with that though, and the success of this test was to, you know, I was mentioning bringing engineering and product into a 2-week cadence. And every 2 weeks we were reviewing the work, where we were at and how we were progressing, and reviewing that prioritization that I was mentioning also. So we align with the engineering and product, you know, methodology and mindset. We align our design, essentially just only the ceremonies, so to speak. And we created that cadence where, you know, we said to them, to our partners, every 2 weeks, we're going to get together and see where we're at and then talk about prioritization. But during 2 weeks, you just leave us alone. Don't try and prioritize the sprint, basically, which was super successful because that created that protection for my entire team for 2 weeks when nobody would come in and say, okay, let's just change everything over again.
Very, very interesting. I have a couple of questions more. I think that we can fit them in 10 minutes. I think that there's one about considering the team size for the design system. How did you ensure that the designs were aligned with the design system?
Yeah, so the whole point of having those, you know, not having guardrails, the problem of not having guardrails embedded, so the code matching the design system, is that we had to have a human being checking the work. And, you know, design system is always evolving and growing and so on. So you've got two options. Either you said, this is my design system and I'm the only person that can build the design system, and then it's defeating the point of the design system. Or you said, okay, let's open up this design system so that we can have contribution and so on, but we have to have a system of reviewing contribution and so on. So you kind of scale yourself and scale your contribution. So my experience in this team is that we were looking into transitioning to that sort of second phase, which is we're gonna let external authors providing content and have them, you know, authorized or vetted or trained to do so. And that's again that, you know, distributed or decentralized team versus centralized team. You know, how do you transfer, how do you move from this is my design system and we are a centralized team to that hybrid model where decentralized team are almost part of your team because they can, you know, contribute to your design system. I don't know how to do it, especially at that scale. I think smaller companies like Facebook, which is a lot more smaller, I think they're, for comparison, their search team, I think it's about like 100 people. I think they have like 2 designers compared to Amazon search for search at Facebook. So I think because that size is smaller, they can do that sort of hybrid system, but I you know, at Amazon it's very challenging.
Right, thank you. There's another one here about, so you talked about templatizing, not reproducing work, and that was, I think, referring to your example about the ad team. So, and this is stuff we hear all the time now about design ops. Back in 2013, what guidelines did you use?
Sorry, what guidelines did I use for?
I'm guessing that, so this is stuff that we hear about now. So with the design ops being popular, I understand that.
Oh, like how did I figure it out?
Yeah, I think that's what this person wanting to know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. I had to figure it out, and it was about sort of, you know, understanding the phases of the project life cycle. And if you think about kind of in a very linear way, advertising was a bit like a production line, you know, it was very linear, and everything that was more custom campaigns, it was a custom approach. But the power of very linear campaigns is that you can do 100 or manage 100 because they're all the same. It's just a repeating pattern. So if you think about design system, again, it's like repeating patterns. You create a system and then you run with it. So it was really understanding sort of the patterns and understanding each of the phases. And yeah, I don't know how I did it. I can't remember now, but I figured it out in a way that allowed me to continually improve, basically, you know. And again, it's that sort of design approach where, you know, you find a problem, you define a solution, you implement it, and then you assess and improve continuously.
That's really interesting because it is, like you said, applying design principles to manage design.
100%.
Coming to, we have 3 questions. I'm going to pick one, which is it impressive to scale design sprints? We haven't talked about that yet. So it's impressive to scale design sprints. Indeed. Did you have a VP sponsor for this?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I did not. My head of design was sponsoring the event. So we had buy-in from a VP of search, and we so that was part of the communication, basically, is to getting the other VPs and director on board with this idea, because they were giving us people for an entire week. So while we didn't have a mandate from our VP say, this is what search is going to be doing, we kind of went rogue, to be honest. It was kind of the spirit of my team, and said, okay, let's just do this thing and get it done. From like a tactical perspective, you know, Amazon, especially in the HQ, has a lot of resources. Was able to secure this really cool room on the 26th floor with view of the sound. So you have resources. There are resources available, but the one resources that we had to get buy-in from was the people and their time.
Always herding cats, isn't it?
Of course, exactly.
Lastly, I'm going to squeeze just one more in. It says, what's your best recipe to success on design alignment and management when designers are spread into scope-oriented teams?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think, and that is something that Amazon really ingrained in me. It's to start from the customer problem and working backwards. So there's an example. I didn't really speak to my time at Amazon Fashion, but we were a centralized, decentralized team in a sense that we were, you know, we had a head of design, we were all together, but we had 2 directors that were funding our team, which meant essentially that my headcount was kind of like a split headcount. So was the researcher, which was very awkward because obviously you can't split a person right in the middle. So creating that alignment was not easy. Conversations were tough and difficult. You know, it's the same sort of like trade-off conversation, prioritization conversation, and, you know, being able to get 2 different teams agree and sometimes agree that their project is not the highest priority right now. And to create that alignment, the one secret sauce is starting from the customer and working backwards, which is one of the Amazon principles, customer obsession. And at that point, I was telling my product partners in particular, was saying, hey, come on, like, you know, if a customer goes on Amazon to buy fashion, to buy clothes and shoes, they just want one experience. They don't want to have 2 completely different, you know, sets of features that might be actually doing the same thing, or overlapping or conflicting, because we have 2 different teams internally. That doesn't make any sense. So let's start from the customer, think about that customer problem, and then figure out our internal, you know, discussion another time, because what really matters is to find a solution for our customer.
Wow, that's an excellent note to end our meetup tonight. Thank you so much, Marion. I don't know if there's anything else that you could possibly tell us tonight. If you want to share anything about what you're doing in Barcelona or how people could reach you. I think that you had it on your last slide. I invite you to actually, if you want to post it on the discussion board for the meetup tonight, if people want to get back to you, if that's what you want, of course, not obliged. If they want to get back to you to ask you any questions or just be in touch, whoever's in Barcelona, Marion has just arrived. She doesn't know a lot of people, hasn't been socializing much, unfortunately. And I'm sure that she'll be happy to hear from all of you guys. So on that note, oh, we just had another camera popped in. Apparently Mark doesn't worry about his GDPR rights. He can, he's all right being on our YouTube channel later. So for those who don't know, Mark is the common element between Marion and me. We all work together at Mark's agency in London, Wilson Fletcher. Brief time, but it worked. We coined.
Did.
It was like 100 years ago.
Pretty much.
Good
to see you, Mark.
For Marion. Anyway.
Thank you so much, Sarah, everyone. That was a pleasure. Fantastic to meet all of you. Yeah, I've just pinged my LinkedIn. Feel free to get in touch, ask questions away. I'm here. Yeah, I just got here and then got confined and locked down. So yeah, get in touch. I'd love to chat. Thank you, everybody.
All right, and see you in the next meetup, guys.
Thank you. Bye.